Hello, Scrufftards, Vatniks, and random degenerates. Welcome to the war zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And I got a cold, I got a sore throat, and I'm dying. But anyway, we're gonna make a short video, brief video, taking a look at some updates. We're gonna take official casualty figures and why those are the way they are. Quick look at some Swedish vehicles incoming to Ukraine, and also we're going to take a look at why Kursk is a massive success. So Zelensky himself has provided the official casualty figures as provided by Ukraine. Keep that in mind. These are Ukrainian numbers. And according to Ukraine, Ukraine has lost 43,000 killed in action, with 370,000 wounded in action. And out of these, half have been able to return to duty after a treatment. Russia, on the other hand, has lost 198,000 killed in action, with 550,000 wounded in action. And well, we know how Russia operates. It doesn't matter if you have shrapnel in the belly, you can still fight. So I think it's safe to assume that half of the wounded Russians have returned to combat as well. Interestingly, though, 80% of casualties in this war has been from indirect fire, also known as artillery and mortars, missile barrages, and what have you. So, I mean, do the math here, and you can figure out how many people have been killed and injured by artillery. What is interesting, though, is for every killed in action Ukrainian soldier, Russia has lost 4.6 killed in action. So, I mean, this is why is this? Well, Russia is more than often on the offense. They are attacking. They're attacking at a crazy pace that exposes troops to incoming fire. It's also evidence that Ukraine's artillery, based on Western weapons, are more accurate than Russia. Russia likes to conduct massive barrages. Wide areas are being hit by artillery, not accurate. So that's also a factor that Ukraine has more accurate artillery, able to strike Russians as they're on the move during assaults. Another big factor is that Russia does not use standard tourniquets. These are absolutely crucial pieces of equipment to stop bleeding and to save lives. It has been proven over and over again in combat situations, in terrorist attacks, random civilian instances when someone needs help when they're bleeding out. Tourniquets save lives. That's just the way it is. If you don't have a tourniquet, the chances of dying increase dramatically in a crisis situation or in a combat situation. And Russia does not hand these out to troops. Instead, they have this weird rubber band thing that they're supposed to tie around their arms like a drug addict and just tie the knot, to try and stop the bleeding. This obviously has an effect on the Russian troops, and this is why I think they have such huge numbers of killed in action. They don't use tourniquets. People bleed out before they get proper medical assistance. Ukraine, on the other hand, obviously supplies tourniquets to their troops, and as a consequence, they have fewer killed in action than the Russians because they can stop the bleeding and people can then survive until they get a proper medevac. So I think that is the most important factor when talking about these numbers. It is the fact that Russia does not use tourniquets, and we're seeing it in these numbers. And there's also a rumor. I have not really been able to find a good source if this is true or not. So if you can find it, please link or talk about it, mention it in the comments. The rumor is that Russia's artillery advantage has gone down from, we know it used to be 8-1 or 10-1. It has actually shrunk down to 1.5-1. So for every Ukrainian artillery round fired, Russia does not now. They used to fire 10 or 8. Now Russia only fires 1.5 artillery rounds for every round fired by Ukraine. So keep that in mind. That massive Russian artillery advantage has caused the casualties that we can see here. And now the artillery advantage has diminished potentially to barely nothing at all. They are essentially equal. And if they're on equal footing in the artillery duel, when 80% of casualties come from indirect fire, and these are the numbers we're seeing from that artillery duel, when Ukraine was at a disadvantage, I mean, now that they potentially are on an equal footing, 2025 will, well, it doesn't look like it's going to be a good year for the Russian soldiers, if we put it that way. And next up, we have the PBV 302, this old Swedish armored personnel carrier from the 60s. Used to be considered an infantry fighting vehicle, but by modern standards, it is a heavy APC. It has been spotted in Kursk. As soon as Ukraine received these, they moved the first batches up to Kursk, and eyewitness accounts has mentioned that one of the reasons why Ukraine has such success in Kursk, it is because of the PBV 302s. They can traverse muddy, snowy, difficult terrain unlike anything else, and Russian vehicles cannot traverse terrains of this type as easily as the PBVs. So this gives Ukraine a massive tactical advantage, as in they can redeploy troops quickly and get them to where they need to be. And of course, they can be resupplied. If you fill these vehicles up with 2 tons of ammo and other equipment, you can get a lot of equipment out to your frontline troops wherever they are without fear of getting stuck in the mud or in the snow or in ditches and what have you. So the PBVs, they have reached the front line. They're fighting in Russia, and they are providing Ukraine with tactical advantage over the less capable Russian vehicles. And it is crazy to think that tiny Sweden has built vehicles that are so capable, so powerful, so deadly that Ukraine has now pushed them to the front line, and they are fighting inside Russia proper itself. We have the PBV 302s, we have CV90s, and we have STRE 122 main battle tanks, Swedish equipment put to use within Russia itself, helping Ukraine to defend themselves, helping Ukraine to defend Western democracy by taking the fight to the fascists in Russia. And I mean, this is tax money well spent, if you ask me. This is what Swedish tax money should fund. These weapons that can help Ukraine defend themselves, that can help Ukraine take the fight to Russia itself and fight a fight that they have to win in order to defend their independence and to defend their democracy. And speaking of Swedish equipment, it has been announced that Ukraine will receive 40 CV90-35NL during 2025, probably towards the later half. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Swedish defense minister mentioned something along those lines. The previous rumor had the number 230 in total, based on comments made by the Dutch Minister of Defense at the time. So it could be that these 40 are the first batch out of the total number of 230. We know that Sweden has received 50 of the same vehicle because they want to fill the void after giving Ukraine 50 CV90-40s. And we know Denmark will get something like 100 of these vehicles as well. But all in all, between the Danes, the Swedes, and the Ukrainians, that is roughly 200 vehicles. And we know the figure 230 has been mentioned by the Dutch while talking about these vehicles being provided to Ukraine. So hopefully these 40 are the 41st being delivered out of the total 230. These are very capable vehicles, by the way. These are not old Cold War era things. These are state of the art, designed in the past 20 years, equipped with modern weapons, some of state of the art anti-tank guided missiles, state of the art ammunition, a 35 millimeter chain gun, capable of taking out anything on the battlefield except for maybe tanks, and from any angle, front, left, center, whatever. And it has a lot of nifty gadgets, active protection systems, small turrets that engages incoming drones and RPG rounds and what have you. Very capable vehicles, and Ukraine will be receiving them together with German Lynx infantry fighting vehicles that are on par with the CV9035NL. So in 2025, Ukraine will be fielding the most advanced infantry fighting vehicles available on the planet. And Kursk is a success. I've said it before, but here we have from the ISW and their reports, where we can see here Russian forces have redeployed elements of several elite formations to Kursk Oblast, including 810th Naval Infantry Brigade. They have seen some issues, as we've heard. They've lost a lot of troops, and much of the unit has been taken as prisoner of war up at Kursk. We also have the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade that has made a lot of the big gains for Russia in Kursk. We also have 98th and 104th and 7th Airborne Divisions, VDV, considered to be elite in the Russian army. And we also have the 11th, 83rd VDV brigades and what have you. And the Russian military command generally regards VDV and naval infantry elements as more elite forces. And as it says, despite the fact that these forces have been degraded and misused during the war. And as it says, the Russian military command would have likely redeployed these forces to reinforce the efforts in Pokrovsk if Ukrainian forces had not launched the Kursk incursion in August. And as it says, Ukrainian officials noted in September 2024 that the incursion slowed Russian advances in Donetsk Oblast and complicated Russia's plans for offensive operations. So, like I said, they pushed into Kursk, and that forced Russia to allocate vital units and vital resources to fight in Russia instead. And that is what Ukraine wanted. They wanted to move Russian resources, Russian elite units from Ukraine to Kursk and into Russia, moving the war to Russia away from Ukraine. And we're seeing it. And now there's political pressure from Moscow to the Russian generals. They have to deal with this before Trump comes into office. And we've seen these crazy assaults made by Russia to try and overwhelm the Ukrainians. And the only thing that's happening is that Russian soldiers get wiped out, and now Ukraine can actually push back and reclaim lost territory. I mean, Kursk is without a doubt a success. They are forcing Russia to move troops from Ukraine into Russia. They are moving the war slowly from Ukraine into Russia. And some of the best Russian units have ended up in Kursk, and they are being slaughtered in Kursk because they are misused by Russian command. And that's going to have to be it for this video. There's tons of stuff to talk about. Obviously, you have the things in Syria with Russia abandoning their positions and the bases in Syria, clearly indicating that Russia cannot fight wars in multiple locations, and they are desperately trying to save what they can before the rebels grabs Russian equipment and Russian technology and information down in Syria. And in Georgia, I think it's really interesting. We're seeing in Georgia what happened in Ukraine in 2013 with the Euromaidan, when the Ukrainians rose up against the pro-Russian establishment and wanted to move west to become part of the EU And we're seeing the exact same thing in Georgia now. The difference is, of course, in 2014, Russia responded militarily in Ukraine, which then culminated in 2022 with the invasion, with the all-out invasion. And can Russia repeat that in Georgia? Should the Georgians reclaim their country? I don't think we'll see Russian military intervention in Georgia like we saw in Ukraine. I think the Georgians, if they can push through with this and hold on, they can become a free and democratic country that will be able to move closer to Europe, and they can then start dealing with the oligarchs and the corruption and everything, and become a proper Western nation, just like we've seen Poland do and Romania doing. Yeah, I mean, Hungary is Hungary. Still issues there, but I mean, most of these countries, they have ended up becoming functional Western societies. And with Russia bogged down in Ukraine, Georgia stands a good chance of joining those countries and becoming a proper Western European country. Anyway, that's going to have to be it. Hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.